Hello, and welcome to a Xerocraft tutorial. I am David Olson. Today I'm going to be showing you some of the basics on how to work the program Inkscape. So first, we're going to show you how to download the program. So go into Google, type in Inkscape. You can go to the website here or straight to their download page. Go to downloads here, depending if you're a Windows or Mac or Linux user. I'm a Windows user. And if you know you have 32-bit or 64-bit, whichever your version, you download the installer, then save file, it'll download, and you just run the installation. One thing to note, if you already have Inkscape and you have version 0.48.5, you actually have to uninstall that first and then reinstall the latest version, which is 0.91. So anyways, that aside, that is how you install the program. So now, let's actually pull up what the program is itself. Now when you first pull it up, you'll have this boxed area. This is what is known as your canvas. Just think of it as the same as if you're painting on an easel. You can only paint what is the white in front of you. Anything outside of that is not going to show up. So the things that I highly recommend that you have is a separate mouse. Make sure it has the scroll wheel so you can scroll up and down, and also that it has a middle click ability so that you can move around easily like that. So in essence you have 3 mouse buttons: left click, right click, and middle click. That is an essential if you're a designer. That will help you out a lot. Alright, let us go through the tools at your disposal. So I'm going to first focus on this panel of tools here to the left. This cursor right here is your Selector Tool. So when you actually select an object, you can click on it and move it around. The options that it provides for you is a scaling feature. You can scale vertically, horizontally, or diagonally. So you're scaling vertically and horizontally. If you wish to keep proportional sizing, hold down the control button while you're scaling it. And you see that it's proportionally scaling along whatever corner that you're scaling from. If you hold down the shift button, it will scale both sides. And likewise, if you hold down both buttons, control and shift, it will scale proportionally right from the center. So that's how the scaling works, and a few buttons to help you out. Alright. Next, we've got the rotation. Now these ones here on the corner are what you're going to be using the most. When you click those, you rotate the object around. Now if you hold down the control button while you're doing this, I want your eyes to be focused right in this area while I'm doing this. You'll see that it's rotating 15 degrees, 30, 45, 60. So this way you can get perfect, it's a square, you want a perfect 45-degree angle or a perfect 90-degree angle. Make sure you hold down the control button while you're rotating it around. These just skew the object. They're not going to be a whole lot of times where you may use this, but who knows, you just might. And holding down the control button works in a similar fashion. You're skewing it by an increment of 15 degrees. So that's what the Selector Tool does. This one here edits the nodes of an object. I'll do an example. I'll create a star, which I'll get to later. But then I'm going to make it into an actual object. So when I select an object and I go to the node editor, You see that it has a bunch of red lines plus these little gray diamonds. This is what composes a vector image, are these nodes and these lines connecting them. Now if you left click and drag, you can move these nodes around and create an entirely new shape. So I just started off with a polygon, 5-sided pentagon shape, but now I have something that looks more akin to a really badly drawn Pac-Man. So that is how the node editor works. Now, while you're within this, there are a lot of tools up here that are useful and that I'll get into. But for now, we're just focusing on the tools to the left. This one, I don't know. It is used to sculpt and paint. So when you select it, it creates this circle and it just moves the object around. There's not a whole lot of that in use for laser engraving that I've found, but if you want to nudge an object around without actually selecting it and dragging it, then you can use that. Sorry. This is your zoom tool to click and zoom out by left clicking, or right click to zoom out. I'm sorry, left click zooms in, right click zooms out. Or if you want to zoom, hold down the control button and scroll up on your mouse wheel or scroll down on your mouse wheel to zoom in and out. This is the measurement tool. Now, depending if you're selected in pixels or inches or millimeters, I go with inches. You select an area, you scale out, and you see in that gray box it has the distance between this origin point and wherever I currently have my cursor. So, 10.19 inches tall. And you see on the curve, it shows the radius, or shows the angle, rather, that this is going at. So if you're wanting a very specific angle on something you're making or a very specific curve, this is a good tool to know how far away something is. You have to give you an eyeball. Oh yeah, it's that far. And when you let go of left click, then it disappears. Alright, this is your square creator, for making rectangles or squares. And like I showed you before, when you hold down the control button, it will give you a proportional square, a perfect, same on both sides square. Now, when you let go of left click, it will give you some dotted lines and squares in a circle. Now, what these are, if you click on this top left square, it's essentially doing that scaling thing where you can create, it into a rectangle or into a larger square, or hold down control to do the proportional scaling. And it's the same for this one over here. So these two boxes just let you make the square bigger or smaller. Now the circle, if I click and drag it down, you'll see that the curved corners start appearing. Now these are on only two sides, but it affects all the corners. Now I can scale this one a little higher and this one all the way to the side, so you get more of an egg-shaped sort of square look. Oh, and if you deselect away from that and you want to go back into it, select it and double click it, and it'll get you back into its template mode. So if you find you have it curved and you want it back to a perfect square, that's what this button up here is. It says make corners sharp, and it will snap everything back to 0. And that's what these numbers here are reflecting. When this goes up, you'll see that this one's moving. And turn this up, you see that the other one is moving also. RX and RY. So the top one is the x-axis, and this one on the right is the y-axis. So if you want to proportionally move them so that they're equal distance apart from each other, you can do that from here. Make them both 5. Or you can click on one, hold down Control, and left click, and it will proportionally move both in the same increments. So that is how the square creator works. The one right next to it is creating 3D boxes. I would avoid that for use in the laser creator world. It just creates a 3D box that you can edit and manipulate. It gives really cool effects, but as far as using it in laser cutting, it's difficult to say the least, and you're not going to find too much use for it. So if you want to learn more about it, I'll show you, but not for the purposes that we have at the time. Next one, however, is creating circles. So again, click and drag, and the same principles for the square. If you hold down Control and Shift, proportionally scaling them, the boxes will just create it in a different shape. But now the way that the circles work on this one is you can make it like a pie graph. And you can create a pie wedge or a Pac-Man face. If you see the options up here, this gives you the Pac-Man pie wedge look. But if you select the other one, then it just makes a line from the circle to the circle. Or you can go straight back to the Pac-Man look. It's just a way from jumping from one view to the other. But if you decide, oh, I just wanted the circle, then you can do the make a whole eclipse or ellipse, and it will create a circle again. Right, that's how the circle template works. Alright, like I showed you before, this one creates stars and polygons. When you click and drag, you didn't have to worry about this too much with the square. Whoa. You didn't have to worry about this too much with the square and the circle one, but when you create a new object, it locks to the tip top of that shape. So if you would like it to be at the very top, absolutely on this top, hold down Control, and it will lock along that axis. So again, rotating by increments of 15 degrees, it'll keep at 0 degrees right here, and then you can scale it down to be whatever you need. And when you let it go, you'll see that there's only one diamond. Now, this is done on purpose because this tool is a polygon and star creator. So right now, Polygon, we just have a certain number of sides, which we can control right here. The lowest number you can go to is 3, because that's a triangle. Any smaller than that, and you'll just have a line. But you can go an infinitely high number. I don't know what it actually caps out at, but as you can see, it's still going, and it's basically a circle. But I want to keep it as a pentagon, five sides. But I'm going to switch from a polygon to a star. Now you'll see that it added an extra diamond here. Now the way that these two work, if I move this diamond up, you'll see that it's creating a star look, and that this one is staying still. And in like fashion, I'm holding down the Control button while I do this so that it stays proportionally along its axis, its line here. If I just free-handed, no control button, moved it around, then I can create these cool spiral, disc looks, which kind of looks like that space age door kind of feel. And that may be what you're going for. So it all depends on what you want. But as far as the difference really between these two, if I click and drag this one around, I'll actually rotate the star itself, while as this star, I'm only manipulating that inner uh, node. And yeah, like I just did here, you can intersect itself and create some nifty little geometric patterns here. So if you're into that kind of art, then that may be something that you enjoy. Right, so that's the star and polygon tool. Next one, we got the spiral. That looks like a big seashell, but I'm going to change something on it. I'm going to turn fill off and stroke on. I'll explain those a little more in a minute. But this is the spiral creator. Now the way this one works is this outside diamond, you click and drag and you can create more turns, which is reflected also in this number. As I scale that up, which it does much faster, is just creating more and more, well, more and more rotations. So I'm just going to keep this at a simple 10, just so it's not, overbearingly everywhere. Double clicking it to get back into the template editor, and the inside number, which is the inner radius, if we turn that up, whoa, it goes really fast. If we turn that up, it starts from the inside and working its way out. So it hasn't messed with the turns at all, but it's just the inner radius where that actually starts. So 0 is the focal middle point. Now divergence. Wow, that was the title of that book, and I've never really noticed that until now. Funny. Anyways, if I turn this down, all the lines will be pushed to the outside. Now, it only goes from a scale of 0 to infinity, but 1 is equal distance between lines. Any lower than that, and it will have sort of a Doppler effect, or a reverse Doppler effect, whatever. Anyways, they'll be closer together the more outside you are, and the more inside you get, the farther apart the lines are, until you just get to 0 and it's just, again, a circle. So, and if you turn it up to, I think comfortable is 2, is you get an actual vortex look where it's tight in the middle, and then the farther out you go is more separated. Anyways, that's how the spiral tool works. And if you hit the brush, then it just resets it all back to a default position. Right? This freehand pencil tool is the sloppy Microsoft Paint kind of world where you can, I'm drawing lines. Except, no, I don't want to save that. Except if I'm drawing lines here, then when I go into the node editor, it's just a big mess of lines. So it's not really accurate as far as a straight line or a curve. So I'm not going to suggest you use this too often, but if you're looking for something that's more freehand, like you actually have a stylus, then cool. Alright, so deleting that. But the one that is much neater is the drawing Bezier curves and straight lines. So this one has the fountain pen. So you click wherever you want to start, and I haven't clicked or anything yet. It has a straight line. It's waiting for me to put in another point. So I'm going to left click. It creates a green line. So now it's created point A and point B. And now it's wanting me to make another one. And ideally, I can create an infinite number of node points. Now, if I wanted to keep this as just a line, then right here, I would hit enter, and it would create just a line. But if I wanted to close it off to make, I'll make letter E. Now if I wanted to close this all off, I'd go back to my origin point until it gets red, and then click that. And then it automatically finishes the template. So the reason for that being important, I'll explain when I touch on the colors and strokes. So the next tool is the Calligraphy tool, and this is like the pens and ink features where you can create the ballpoint pen look. It's a nice artistic way of drawing pretty lines, or if you're into calligraphy, that's the way that tool works. And when you actually have the tool selected, you can choose how wide the actual stroke is, if there's any thinning. So it gets thinner the slower you go. Anyways, that is calligraphy. And then the text editor. So you click and drag a text box, and you type in your thing, and hit the select button to select away from it, and that is how you create text. Now if you want to change the font, that's what this button up here is. So we're going to select our text, go up here to this icon. Why is it not? Oh, it's already there. Weird. Whoa. And possibly because I'm recording and doing all this that it's going slow. I'm actually going to stop for a second and let this catch up. Okay. So to edit the font, I bring up this tab here to bring up the text and font, and you can select whatever text you actually want, and the font size, how far the letters are spaced apart. For example, if I want them 200% apart, like so. Alright. And from here, it would be good to note that there is font size, yes, but while it says 32 font here, and if you're thinking your text document, oh, I usually have it at 20 font. If I scale this up, then when I go back into the text, you'll see that it's much bigger. So what you really need to consider is the real world size of your object, which would be reflected right here, your width and height of an object, which is something I will go into right now. So those are your primary tools that you're going to be using here. Anything additional are specialty tools. So those will be discussed in later videos. Alright. Now I'm going to bring up one of the other important tools. This is the Document Properties tab. Now this is what we will use to define the dimensions of our canvas. The only part you really need to worry about is this window section right here. Now it asks for the width and the height of the canvas and what units of measurement you're using as your reference. I stick with the inches, and it'll auto-populate and calibrate, if it's in inches or millimeters. so you don't have to actually do that math yourself. So I'm going to set my width to be 12 inches by 12 inches, a foot by a foot, or square foot. So that is how you change your canvas map. Now, some other important tools, like I mentioned before, the color tab. This is your fill and stroke. Now, the difference between the two, you see that this circle as a default comes up to red because this has red turned on, and stroke is the border outline. So that's what stroke is. So if I turn fill off, you see I just have an outline. These are the designer phrases and words for special features. Anyway, so the only two tools you need to worry about for laser engraving is the off and the on. Now there's also linear gradient where it fades from black to white or whatever color you have it, or starts it off in the middle. These can be used in laser engraving, but these are advanced features which I can go over, but for a basic overview, just for now, color on, color off. And for stroke, if I turn it off, it almost looks like nothing even happened. That's because the line is already black. Now I will show you this third tab here, which is stroke style. So I'll turn fill off, turn stroke on. Stroke style, if stroke is turned off, everything will be grayed out and you can't even do anything. So it'll only work if you have stroke turned on. Now I'm going to zoom in closer to the line. As a default, it uses pixels as the unit of measurement. So if I set it to millimeters, it'll show that's what size it is in millimeters. And as I turn that up, you'll see that the line gets thicker. So that is the way the stroke tool gets a thicker border. And if I go back into the template editor and I scale that around proportionally or make that Pac-Man face again, it'll keep the same line thickness for the entire object. Alright. Now there are other tools and features here, but those are specialty features that don't really work in this template editor. But I can go over those at a later time. Alright, so those are the basic tools to get you started on using Inkscape. The only things to keep in mind beyond that is what the laser engraver uses as engraving colors and cut colors. Now I have a template color palette here to use as a reference guide. The way that the Trotec job control software works is it has a 16 color hierarchy of it does this color first and then that color and so on and so forth. It does engraving and cutting. Engraving is like etching a picture or a word into a plaque, and then cutting is cutting the actual square out. To demonstrate this, I'll make a put my name, and my name is already as default a black color. Then I create a square around that. I'm going to turn fill off. Now the default cut line color that we're going to be using, and that Xerocraft just uses as a default, is red. So I'm going to change red to 255. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the way that graphic design programs translate color, it's all red, green, blue, or RGB. There's also A, that's called the alpha channel. That makes it transparent. Actually, it's better shown with this one. If I turn it down, that just makes it transparent. That will actually confuse the laser engraver as far as what color that is. So solid black is all zeros, and solid red is 255 red. That's as red as you can get. So just make sure that alpha is turned all the way up. And you also notice that we have these two options down here, blur and opacity. Opacity is also a transparency feature. Make sure that is at 100%. And blur just creates a blurred effect. Again, these have their uses with laser engraving, but especially with cut lines, this needs to at all times be 0. If it is even at 0.1, you may not know a difference or even see a real difference unless you zoom in really closely, but it will not recognize that as a cut line. And the other thing to make sure on, the actual thickness of the line is taken into consideration. Like I said before, it defaults to pixels, so that's what I'll explain it as for now. This needs to be 1/10 of a pixel, or 0.1 pixels. You hit enter, and you see that the line thinned up a lot. Now, if you zoom out far enough, that line just completely disappears. So I'm at 40% zoom, so you're not going to see it. You can start to see it, at 80%. You can comfortably see it. So it is that thin, yes, and yes, it does need to be like that to be a cut line. But this is what I would send through to the laser engraver. I have black area to be etched or engraved, and then it would follow this red path to cut it out. And this would be my object. If you want to know what it is in a real world size, in the canvas viewer, this is the unit of measurements that you're viewing your objects in. Again, I'm going back to inches. If you select the cutout border, you'll see that it's 8.3 inches wide and 3 inches tall. Now you can actually select that and make it exactly 3 and exactly 8. And the proportions stay the same. It's the same line thickness, it's the same color, so none of that changes. Alright, one last tool to explain before I finish up. That's the Align and Distribute tool, which is this one right here. It's the one that shows the bar graphs. Now, if you're noticing that the tools up on top aren't showing up, they might actually be along the side here. And if that just depends on your screen resolution. And if you're noticing that it's not here on the side, but about right here, you see these two double arrows, or an icon that looks kind of like that. Go ahead and click on that. Like I say, it'll be about down here. And find the title of the tool. The little icon won't actually show up, but it'll have the name of that tool. So the one that we're using now is Align and Distribute. Now, it's relative to whatever item that you have selected. So the first thing that you selected, the last thing you selected, the biggest, the smallest, I'm just going to do it by page. And it's saying treat selection as group. That means if I have this whole thing selected, I want to treat this as a group. So if I center it vertically and horizontally, it's centering it as if these things were a single item. But if I want just the outline here centered, I just select that and unclick treat as group. Center it vertically, center it horizontally, and select the name, center vertically, center horizontally. Now I have my text centered exactly within this border cut line. So that's perfectly centered. So if you have it originally right here and you want to be like, I think it's centered right there, go ahead and use this one so you can know for sure, yes, it's centered. All right, and from here, you're actually ready to send it to Laser Engraver. On this new version of Inkscape, they actually fixed up the files so that you can mostly print straight from Inkscape. So you just print, make sure Trotec Engraver is selected, and select print. There are settings to take into consideration that Xerocraft has already, set, the size and dimensions of the engraving table. Other little settings here to make sure, that it's scaled down to where it needs to be. You don't have to worry about these ones on top. The only things you really need to worry about are the material settings, which, are you using it on wood? Are you using it on glass? This is the material library that Xerocraft already has installed, and the different processes. And in a later tutorial, I will give a greater explanation on what these do and how they can be used for your project. But as far as the tutorial itself, that concludes my explanation on Intro to Inkscape. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day and continue watching. Take care. Hack on.